I want to talk about LinkedIn because you mentioned in your work that you do that you were unjustly terminated. What happened? And can you walk me through, that experience, that moment of what happened and how you navigated through that?
As somebody who already had a background in the company and had already proven success even in a different line of business, when a manager has built that case against you, you don't even have the option to go back to your previous team. And I said, "Hey, look, it's very evident you don't want me in this role. And there is nothing I can do to turn this around." And that's when the gaslighting began. Like, you can turn it around, but you're choosing not to. And I said, let's not even get into it because we have very different perspectives of this situation. I've given this my all. I'm sorry I have not been able to meet your expectations. But it's very evident you don't want me here, and I'm not going to be here much longer. So I'm not quitting, but if you'd like to terminate me, go ahead. That's fine. But I have a proposition I want you to consider.
Devika, I'm so excited to have you here and hand me the mic. How are you doing today?
I am doing so well, Zynara. It's such a pleasure to talk with you as usual.
Tell me, what were you like as a kid? And also, did you have this dream for yourself of what you wanted to do when you were younger? What was the plan?
English was something that was really just stood out and something I really enjoyed. And so I wanted to translate that into a career. So I actually moved into Santa Clara University to do my undergrad and had majored in English, minored in education. And that was the plan, to become a high school English teacher and help other, high school age kids fall in love with English and literature. But one day into the master's program, and getting, my teaching credentials, I decided that wasn't the path that I wanted to take. Something had shifted internally, and it was not the vision anymore. And so, at the age of, what was that, 22, I had to really rethink what that meant for me, because from the age of 14 to that point, it was all about becoming a teacher, and then it suddenly had pivoted. So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board at that age, where you were really expected to figure out, how will you get a job and how will you make money and build a life for yourself. And so that was an interesting season of just leaning into different interests and seeing where I ended up.
Wow. So you're telling me day one of grad school, you had already all these signals and feelings that this wasn't right for you. Can you walk me through what were some of those, what was that telling you, internally? What were some of those signs for you? And how did your mom react?
Well, so my mom is an immigrant. She came to Canada when she was 20, and then moved to the States when she was about, what, 34 or so. So even though she spent most of her life in North America, we were raised, with the concept of build a life for yourself, have a career that's respectable, make a living, be responsible. And so what was interesting is that I actually had a full ride to do my master's program at Santa Clara and become a teacher. And so, it was a hard thing, I think, for her to grasp that I was walking away from a full ride, one, and then two, being like, I don't actually know what I want to do with my life. And what's funny is that, I think most immigrant parents would be like, would have an issue with that. And I think she was concerned, but I also think there was a level of trust that she had with me that I would indeed figure it out, just kind of based on my personality and just the drive that I've always had as a kid of just being able to adapt, learn, and get things done. But when you're asking about what was that feeling, I can't really put it into words except the fact that I was completely disengaged. It's almost like I was sitting there and I should be excited. It's day one. I'm, with my peers who I had, gone through undergrad with, and a lot of us ended up in the same master's program and had that rapport and that relationship. And I was really excited about, stepping into this next season with them to continue our education. But I had no interest. And I was sitting there feeling the feeling of, when you're about to go, you're on a roller coaster and you're going up, 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 and you're climbing and you know that you're about to drop. It's that nervous butterfly type of feeling in your stomach, and I couldn't shake it. And I just knew spiritually and intuitively, and this is kind of carried on throughout my whole life in my decision making, that this wasn't it. And I wasn't willing to spend another day doing something that I knew wasn't for me.
Wow. I love what you're saying because, everyone knows the feeling of joy and excitement for something. But on the other side, to feel the feelings of actually, this isn't for me, there's this like feeling you're describing that I
Mhm.
think some people are too scared to look at. If you think about people in jobs that they've maybe outgrown or situations, relationships that you can list the number of things,
Yeah.
people are really scared to take a look at that feeling. And I'm so glad that you were so honest with yourself and said, this isn't right for me. And you knew something else was out there for you that you were excited about. So walk me through that day one. Did you on day two said, I'm out? What happened there? And were you also nervous and scared to walk away from this plan that you had built?
Yes. I mean, of course, right? I mean, there was a lot writing on it. So what I did was I made this decision that night. I think class was like from 4 to 7, and it was like 7:15, and I was like, no, we're moving forward. So I didn't just quit. I had actually deferred. So that gave me some flexibility to not make a detrimental decision that I would regret later. Deferment meant that I had up until a year to come back, or at that point, forfeit the scholarship. Um, and at that season of my life, I was getting more interested in business, and I had a particular interest in the music industry. Not really because I was interested in the music side of things. I was really intrigued by the business decision making behind artists and behind marketing plans and things of that nature. And I don't even know where that came from. I think maybe just being kind of immersed in pop culture, at that time it was, music, MTV, BET, like that was, what my interests were and what I was, enjoying outside of, school and responsibilities. So I think some of that kind of came into play. And so my mom said, or asked rather, what do you intend on doing? And so at that point, we were approaching summer, and I said, I'm just going to go to Toronto, like I had always done throughout my life. And I'm just going to spend time with my grandmother. But I found this course on music marketing. And so I was like, let me explore this a bit. I had no really experience or exposure to one, music, and then two, kind of like the business side of things. I worked a sales job in cosmetics to put myself like through school and pay for things outside of tuition and whatnot. But other than that, I had really no exposure to business. And so when I took that class, I think there was a spark that came to me again. And spent time. I think it was a 6 week course, and I took that just to learn a bit more. And the professor of that course reached out to me and said, "Hey, there is basically an opportunity at Sony Music Entertainment. They're hiring, and I know you want to stay here in Toronto, so why don't you apply? And if you need like a reference, I'm happy to write you one." Well, got the interview right away. Bob had referred me, and I got the job 3 days later. So then now it was like another pivot of, okay, well, I came to Toronto to visit, and now I just got this job in kind of a junior level, but in the marketing capacity. So I took my butt back to San Jose and packed my bags and went right back to Toronto. And that's how my career in business got started. I lasted 1 year in music. It is a very difficult industry. There's a lot of stuff that kind of happens on the back end that I don't think anyone could prepare you for, and it just wasn't aligned in terms of how I wanted to show up and the values that I have, and some of the expectations of how people want you to show up to acclimate to those environments. So it wasn't a fit in that capacity, but I really learned the general landscape of business, of corporate, of marketing, and then that took me into tech.
Let's talk about tech because I know you've built this career in tech. You worked at Google and LinkedIn. I want to talk about LinkedIn because you mentioned in your work that you do that you were unjustly terminated.
Mhm.
What happened? And can you walk me through, that experience, that moment of what happened and how you navigated through that experience?
Yeah. So, when I was first hired at LinkedIn, it was such a beautiful experience because one, I worked on this team of exceptional talent. These women were so smart. They took me under their wing. I mean, I was selling advertising. I had no idea what I was doing really. And they were showing me the ropes. And they were a very close knit team. So close that if there was one promotion and somebody got it, we were really cheerleading for each other to get it. It wasn't this competitive nature. We truly were a tight knit, like cheerleaders and champions of one another. And so that was something I had never experienced in the workplace. And it was just an amazing opportunity to work on a team like that. I mean, across North America, across LinkedIn, we were known as that team to be high performers, but also have each other's backs and operate with integrity, which I think is like a fabulous brand to have. But, after 4 years of being on that role or in that role, I had, moved up in the department. Um, I came to a point where there was really no more opportunities to explore. With Canadian teams, especially at that point, I mean, they've grown exponentially now, but at that point, there wasn't headcount being added. There wasn't anywhere for me to move into. So I actually ended up taking a more senior position in a different line of business, selling their SaaS product. And with that came a new leader, and the leader that had hired me, we had a really great rapport. It was, she and I just hit it off. She was actually a leader in that previous line of business that I worked in prior. So she hired me. I felt really good about it. But she had a kind of family situation come up, and she ended up taking a leave of absence. And in that leave of absence, a new manager came into the picture, and it was always a very awkward exchange between us. And I can't put my finger on why that is. Like, it just felt so forced, where with other members of my team, it just seemed like, it was just fun and lighthearted. And I think she tried to do that with me, but it didn't feel authentic. There was just something about it that was so disconnected from the very beginning. Um, and I think at the end of the day, she wanted somebody that she could handpick for my role. It was, my role had it was what's called the key accounts, right? So you're working the largest, most high visibility, high revenue accounts in North America and even globally. And so I think she just wanted her choice in my role. And so what began to happen was a lot of microaggressions, a lot of being called out on silly things that, my colleagues weren't being called out on, or, certain things like my colleagues were working from home all the time. This is pre COVID, but, I would rarely see my colleagues. Like, I was the one that was in office the most, and maybe in office like 4 times a week or 3 times a week. But she would call me out on that. Like, why are you working from home? But my colleagues are working from home and no one's saying anything about them. There was a season of our whole team where nobody was hitting their number. But I was, the second best performer. I had one person that was, hitting at 97%. I was at 96%. And I was being called out on not performing well. Meanwhile, I have all these other individuals that are not doing as well as me that are not getting called out. I would get called out on hotel options that I selected when I would, go meet clients. The same hotel I would be staying at, the 4 years prior, and was on the company preferred list. All of a sudden, that was an issue. So now I know it was essentially her way of building a case against me, on really trivial things that shouldn't have mattered. But it was her way of pushing me out.
In those moments when your manager, because managers can make or break an individual's career, really. and you're a high performer, you're clearly doing so well in your role and on your team, yet she uses these excuses or situations to call you out unfairly. In those moments, how did you navigate that? Because I know what it's like to deal with have managers that are really difficult and challenging to deal with. So, looking back, how did you manage those situations at that time?
First, apologetically. Like, anytime I was getting called out, it was just like, "I'm sorry." Like, that was my initial, like, reaction, but then I was like, "Wait, I don't have anything to be sorry about," right? Like, I chose a hotel that's on the company preferred list that not only I've stayed at for the last 4 years, but I used to stay at with my previous manager, so why am I sorry, you know? And so, after I quickly realized, "Hey, don't be so apologetic, you're actually not doing anything that's problematic here," then I would try to add context of like, hey, I have stayed at this hotel the last 4 years. I've stayed, it's on the company preferred list. Um, and then the feedback is, why are you so defensive? You can't take feedback. And that's something we need to work on. So apologizing wasn't getting me anywhere. Adding context and seeking clarity, I think, on the hotel topic, one of the pieces of feedback I got is this is 2x the LinkedIn rate. Well, then when I said, well, what is that rate? I've actually never known there to be a rate. Like, I just see a list on this company portal and I just choose a hotel, and that's how I've operated. So, can you help me understand what that rate is? And then the feedback is, well, you're a senior person on this team, I can't babysit you and give you points for you to have to make decisions on. It's not going to work. So it just became, there was no winning. Not that I wanted to win, I just wanted to
Yeah.
preserve this brand that I had built already. And it was clearly becoming very evident that she did not want me there, and I was not going to be there much longer. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just picturing, being a high performer, doing so well. You're doing everything you can for the company and then to have this experience with this extremely challenging manager, and you can tell she's building this case. So you're right, you're feeling like there is no
Yeah.
win-win. There is no win here for you. And walk me through that moment where, you know, you get let go. How did you navigate that that transition, right? You've been there for 4 years, 4 plus years, and how did you move
Mhm.
through that moment?
In those spaces, generally they can't terminate you unless you've done something abysmal. So generally you get put on a performance plan. So even though I'm hitting at 96% and people are hitting at like 30%, it's, hey, our expectation is that you hit at 100%. You're at 96%. So you need to basically improve this. You have 4 weeks to do it. Well, that's not realistic to change that around and hit 100% in 4 weeks. So, obviously setting me up for failure by the metrics that I had to then meet to show that I was capable of being my role. Um, so there was kind of that process there where I was so stressed out just trying to prove like, hey, I do belong here. Hey, I do perform well. And then also seeking inside of me being like, am I missing something? Like, am I actually the problem here? Right? Like, am I doing something that is giving off a vibe that I don't want to be here? Or so I had to just look internally too. And then I said, no, like I've done everything I possibly can to turn this relationship around. Well, after these several steps of performance evaluations, rather not performance evaluations, performance improvement plans, which is called PIPs in the tech space most of the time. No matter what I did, it was like, hey, you're not improving quickly enough. So I already knew I was set up for failure. I wish I could say I was strong in that season, but I was starting to crumble. Because the one thing that I knew about myself and will always know about myself is that I have integrity. There is no way that I'm going to abuse company, policies and stay at hotels that I'm not supposed to. There's no way I'm going to, work from home and not do my job well. Like, that wasn't the case, but that's what it was being, essentially, I was being perceived like that. Um, and
Mhm.
that bothered me. Like, you can call me a low performer, you're not hitting at 100% all you want, but to make me appear as somebody who's dishonest or taking advantage of corporate policies and people. That's not me. And so that started to eat away at me to the point where I was just crying at work and like had to take breaks and go into the boardroom and like get myself together. My hair was falling out. I couldn't sleep. It was just taking me over for several weeks. And then by the time that third, performance improvement plan process had arrived, I knew there's no surviving this. And the awful part about this is, as somebody who already had a background in the company and had already proven success even in a different line of business, when a manager has built that case against you, you don't even have the option to go back to your previous team where that leader would have hired me back. I know she would have, or if she would have helped me figure something out, because she was like, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. There's no option to move within the company, even though I wanted to be there so badly. I loved it. So after I had just taken a beat, I decided I'm going to take a just kind of like a medical leave. So I had a bunch of PTO kind of already saved up. And I decided I'm just going to take a beat for, a week and a half and just get my head straight. And that week, I had this conversation with God, and I was just like, hey, I have done everything you've asked me to do. I've shown up in the way you've asked me to. What is this about? And I heard him tell me, there's just something more for you, and you're not going to see it for a while. So I just had to muster up that courage to trust in that little voice inside my spirit that was guiding me. And I wasn't willing to be stressed anymore. I wasn't willing to let someone steal my peace and my joy, because that's not who I am. And so I went back after my, little uh, moment of just taking my peace back. And I said, hey, look, it's very evident you don't want me in this role. And there is nothing I can do to turn this around. And that's when the gaslighting began. Like, you can turn it around, but you're choosing not to. And I said, let's not even get into it, because we have very different perspectives of this situation. I've given this my all. I'm sorry I have not been able to meet your expectations. But it's very evident you don't want me here, and I'm not going to be here much longer. So I'm not quitting, but if you'd like to terminate me, go ahead. That's fine. But I have a proposition I want you to consider. And that's when her body kind of perked up and she was intrigued by what was happening here. And I said, I am going to give you 2 full weeks. I'm going to write all the client notes. I'll even train the person that you want in the role, which I had already known who the person was that would eventually take my role over. It was so evident. So I said, I will train this individual. I will hand off everything, button up everything. Great. Just give me 2 weeks and give me the end date, and don't have security walk me out, because I built a brand here and I want to preserve that brand.
Wow. Well, I want to just pause because I'm still even thinking about this whole situation at LinkedIn when you chose to, you know, exit in the way that you wanted to. You mentioned the word integrity and you embody that. That's who you are. And even till that last day, the last few weeks, you chose to step in
Yeah.
with full integrity. You weren't going to play those games, and it's so disappointing to hear another story in a corporate environment where someone gets unfairly,
Mhm.
unjustly terminated. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. But I'm also just really inspired by how you took back your power in in that moment to say, I'm not going to play this game, and I'm going to help you with this transition to your manager at that time, and still walked
Mhm.
out with integrity. So huge kudos to you, because I think not many people in that situation could have walked with that level of integrity for yourself in that moment. People would have just been like, I'm out. Like, I'm not gonna do this. This is crazy. So I just love that you took the high road there, and it very much shows who you are as a person. So I just wanted to really, just say that's amazing for you to step in like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think the logic there is, one, I didn't want to reinforce her perception of me. So that was the first thing. Two, the world is very small. And I never want anyone to think, well, she just kind of like threw her hands up in the air and left after, things got challenging. I wanted the last memory of, how I left to be one that was very positive, because if she said anything negatively about me today, well, it'd just be a flat out lie, because I know that I treated her with the most respect and kindness, even when I wasn't receiving that in return. But thirdly, Zanera, there was strategy involved there. So I always tell people, when you know your job is on the line, don't quit. You have to let them fire you, because then you're, able to file for unemployment. You have a little bit more time with your insurance. There generally is like a severance involved. So you're able to have those benefits, versus if I had quit out of frustration, I would have put myself in a compromising situation. So there was this kind of strategic play there as well.
Absolutely. So, after this whole experience, you were talking about joining a startup, and you said on the 30th day, you knew that this wasn't right for you. So tell me about that day, because it does remind me of your
Yeah.
moment in Santa Clara, day 1 of your master's program. You're like, "This isn't it." And so, you're coming back to this moment again, but at a startup. Was it that same feeling? And what was it about that experience that brought you this clarity?
I came across this journal just the other day. My husband and I moved into a new house. I was unpacking the boxes and I came across a journal, and it was just like this pro and con list of like, if I was going to leave this company. I had literally just started. I mean, I was still within the probation period. It was a hot second. But, I got this role. The role was exciting. I was really excited about the company. My team was awesome. My manager was awesome. I was leading this great team of people. They were welcoming. There's really nothing bad I could say. So I think that was the hard part for me to wrap my head around of, how am I not feeling negatively, but something's not sitting with me. And I ignored it for the first, little bit, but then it started to kind of almost like penetrate my body. Like I would feel like heavy at work physically, like my neck, my shoulders. It almost felt like there was bricks on my back. But when I was outside of the office, I felt like my normal self. And so I was like, okay, well, this is just getting like progressively more intense. And I decided that, kind of just going back to the integrity piece. The manager that had hired me, I had such tremendous respect for him, and he was such a high performer that I knew I didn't want to put him in a weird position by leading a team and just not being there mentally and not having any interest. And I couldn't explain it, but I just didn't want to compromise him. I also didn't want my direct reports to, roll into a manager that didn't want to be there herself. So that is the driving force of like just being transparent with them from the very beginning and saying, "Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Can't explain why this isn't working, but I want to just honor you. And by leaving now, I think that is my best way of honoring you." And so um,
Wow.
that's that's how that happened. It wasn't malicious. There was,
Wow.
nothing. It was a great conversation, and I just kind of left. But it was many days of, even my poor mom. She's had to pivot with me so many times. But like, I would go to the food court on my breaks and just call my mom and be like, "I know I should be so stoked to have this opportunity, but again, something's not feeling right, and I don't want to waste more time. I just don't wanna do it."
That's just that's just amazing how quickly you're able to get there. Was it that same feeling though as day 1 at the master's program? Was it that
Yes,
same
like,
feeling like this isn't
the
it?
same feeling, so it was familiar. So, it's I could identify it right away.
I love that, and I say that because I want people who are listening to tune into that part of themselves. If they're in a situation where they can feel that there is something off and this isn't it, that they should listen to that, because it's amazing to see how quickly you moved, away from these situations that you were just no longer excited about. It just wasn't it.
There's there's a level of understanding the privilege in that, right? If this was my mom raising 3 kids as a single parent in the Bay Area, she could never just be like, "This isn't feeling right. Like, I'm just going to take a beat." Like, that wasn't an option for her. I think, with my, again, pivot into the unknown, I knew I had set up a cushion for myself. So prior to that, I had been saving for several years to purchase this condo in this area of Toronto that I really just I had dreams of living there. Like I had this vision of like how great it would be. And so I was building financially towards that, saving and all of that good stuff. And so it sounds, I guess, like rainbows and butterflies to be like, "Oh, you felt something negative and it wasn't for you and you just followed your dreams." Like, no, it was like a desert. That's what it felt like because I had no backup plan. It's not like I was had other job offers to lean into. It wasn't even part of my plan. I literally had no idea what I was going to do next at all. All I knew was that I didn't belong there. I was going to honor the people who had honored me by giving me a great opportunity, and it had to just be a step by step, day by day thing from that point on. And that season of my life ended up being a step by step, day by day desert season for about 2 years until I started my own company.
Wow. That's incredibly amazing. There's it takes so much courage to walk away from something. You're getting paid well. You have this role and like as a leader and a manager of a at a company, and yet you left it without even having that next plan. It's really inspiring. And I want to hear more about your company and what led you to building your own company and what you're doing right now.
I think it was a couple of different things. One was in corporate spaces, I had access to a lot of career development, leadership development type of training, which was great. But there was this consistent theme of not being able to resonate with the facilitator or not being able to resonate with what these corporate trainers were teaching. It doesn't mean that the information wasn't valuable. It just felt like they lacked some of the lived experiences that I have had to encounter, that would make some of the insights and tools that they were sharing nearly impossible for someone who's encountering kind of nuanced challenges. The second piece is when I was in corporate, I guess I became kind of like a natural mentor to a lot of my peers who would, you know, ask me to help them work through challenges, ask me to help them draft emails, kind of working through similar challenges that I had with my former leader who had pushed me out of the company. So I had this running list of what are the common themes that, my peers of different identities and demographics are running into. And so I had that general understanding and I knew that I wanted to do something about it. I knew that there are going to be challenges that all professionals will face in the workplace, but I didn't want them to be defeated by those things. I wanted them to be able to move forward and leverage their own power, even in environments where they have minimal control. And then I decided to put frameworks to what I was teaching and started to pitch it to companies and see if there was any kind of appetite there to think about learning and development, leadership and talent development in a new way. And my first client that really believed in the concept of what I was trying to do and loved the content and the curriculum that I had designed was Facebook. So Facebook became my first client. And I led a cohort of my 4-week program, which has evolved and, over time. But at that point, it was like my V1. We hit it out of the park with just amazing survey results and, KPIs being met. They expanded it globally within Facebook. And then I took that data, shared it with other corporations, and, they became my clients as well. And so Bridge the Gap has been, a leading career and leadership development firm partnering with global enterprise companies since then.
Wow, I love that. That's incredible. What were those first few years like of building your business? You're doing this thing on your own. You're away from a corporate environment where you have teammates, colleagues, structures, consistent, salary to then starting your own business. And what was that like for you in the first year?
The way I can describe it is you're literally in a desert and you are going to pass out from heat, and you're going to pass out from dehydration, and then you come across just like a teaspoon of water, and then you take that teaspoon of water, and then that gives you like the power for the next 30 steps. That's what it felt like, and to this day still feels like.
Love it. No, but it's, like, very real and very honest because, people who wanna start their own things, like, this is just a real glimpse into that world, you know? So I love that metaphor you use. So it still feels that way, I get that. So walk me through, yeah. Were there moments where, were there moments of doubt or moments that were really difficult as you were building, and what were those moments?
It's always been difficult, but it's always been highly rewarding. Every time that I have, a debrief with a corporate client, or I hear testimonials from people that I get to work with, that drives me. That gives me like the fresh wind that I need to keep going. So it is difficult, and I don't have, like, a massive team behind me. I have very few people that are kinda running, like, instrumental parts of the business, but I am the sales development manager. I am the facilitator and the curriculum builder. I am the renewer. I am legal sometimes looking over, different documents and things, and so that is difficult, especially when, you know, you don't know what you're doing and you didn't anticipate becoming a business owner. I had no framework of how that looks. I had nobody in my family or even my friend groups that were doing what I was doing, especially in leadership and development. I mean, that's such a nuanced kind of, category to grow within as well. And so it really was just being prayerful and just continuing to walk out in faith that it was going to work out. And if it didn't, if this whole thing crumbles, which thank God it has not, um, I have a lot of great experience and I have a lot of great companies that I've worked with. And so I can always, go get the next sales job and this next leadership position at this point. But I think I have this elevated confidence of knowing what I've been able to learn and apply it to my business, right? Even sales, like I think about all of my experience at Google and LinkedIn, even at the other company that I was with for what was it, 30 to 60 days, I don't even know what it was. Even things I learned there in that short amount of time, all of it applies to Bridge the Gap Consulting today. Like none of it got left behind. So, yeah, my path has been not what I had anticipated. I mean, I think I always just thought, grow within tech, go from role to role, the next big company to the next big company. I certainly never imagined this for myself. However, I know I'm equipped and I know I'm nimble and I have the grit to learn what I don't. And I think that's half the battle. I'm Every time I have a conversation with a individual who wants to pursue entrepreneurship, I almost try to talk them out of it before I encourage them to do it. And it's not because I don't want them to succeed. I want to see them win. I want them to see what they can build. But 95% of the time, they have already demonstrated that they they're not willing to be inconvenienced. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have to embrace the fact that you're going to be inconvenienced daily. It's going to feel scary. Things are unstable all the time. I mean, you can be crushing it, but how many business owners have we seen lose everything overnight because of, a silly decision? There's a lot riding on that, especially when you are employing people as well, right? You have to make sure that you're watching out for their livelihood. It's a lot of pressure. And I don't think there's a preparation for that pressure. I think there's an acceptance of it, and just being agile and being able to put your arms around it and give it a big hug. But most people aren't willing to do that. They want the safe route. They want that consistent paycheck. And look, there is nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think social media, comparison, looking at people who are doing things on their own, in their own way, working for themselves, there is this perception that all of the back end stuff that is so hard and challenging doesn't exist. And I'm here to tell you it exists every day, all day.
to someone who wants to start their own business, what would you say that they need to have in order to continue to keep growing and building even when they may not know, if they're going to have enough money to get food or pay rent the next, just what are those what would you say to someone?
I would say be responsible first, right? Having a dream and having passions and goals, all of that is great, but you're grown, and being grown means you have grown people responsibilities, especially if you have mouths to feed, a partner, a mortgage, So I always say don't take the leap until you have at least, the savings to get you through the next like year and a half if you're really taking like the full leap. For me, I had spent years building up a financial cushion because I was saving up for a down payment, right? So that was what I had to fall back on. But if I didn't have that financial kind of provision for myself, there's no way I would have taken that, what I call sabbatical, but it was kind of a forced sabbatical. um, so there's that part. The second part is know your why. So your why can't be, well, my cousin is crushing it and, she didn't seem like she could build a business and now she's doing it and she can do it so I can do it. That's not it, right? So like what is your why? What are you trying to solve? What is going to help you maintain that passion? And I always say, and I've heard other people kind of put it in this way too, like if you weren't getting paid to do this business, would you still love it? For me, I can say yes, because it's just the way I've always operated organically, helping people, helping them solve challenges, think of things kind of out of the box to help them progress. So, for me, that was, yeah, I would still do this if I wasn't getting paid because I have been. And then third is, yeah, just being willing to be inconvenienced, being willing to feel a constant pressure, um, and not subscribing to what you see influencers saying or people you see with overnight success on Instagram and LinkedIn. There's a lot that they're not sharing because they're sharing only the highs. So you have to really take the time to have conversations with people who have done it, right? And ask them not for the good stuff. Ask them about every single thing that's gone wrong, all of the money that they've lost, every single time that they've stayed up at night being concerned if their mortgage is going to get paid because business is slower. Um, Ask them all of the bad stuff. And if at the end of that, you can still say, hey, yeah, I'm willing to do it. I think you're on a great track. And then it's a matter of, well, are you going to build your business as, what they call a side hustle, but, it really does become a second full-time job. That's the way I always suggest folks to do it, just because we know a lot of businesses fail within the first like year, right? So if you have the ability to build, but also maintain your quote unquote 9 to 5, that's probably the best way to do it. Just to get your feet wet and see, how you're feeling about things. But it's just the balance of being responsible and also, leaning into your vision and your goals. But when you're only leaning into your vision and goals, there's probably a lot you're not considering because you're just kind of working off of that excitement and adrenaline.
I love that you're highlighting that, talk to other people who've built their own businesses and ask them about their low points. Were there any sacrifices in building your business that, you know, were things that you want to just share and talk about just so that we have a real understanding of what that looks like?
One sacrifice I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably don't talk about is the sacrifice of your community changing. One thing that occurs when you build a business is people are either going to rock with you and go with you, or they're going to show you very quickly that they don't support you. They might vocally say, hey, you're crushing it. And they're trying to cheerlead you through their words. But when it comes to actually supporting the business or leaving the book review or leaving the testimonial or referring you, um, they're not doing it. Right. And so that kind of shows like, hey, the level of support might not be there from people that you authentically thought would stand in your corner. And that could be friends, that could be colleagues, that could be family. but I can tell you it's always gonna be the person you thought would be the last, and it's going to.
Wow, how do you navigate through something like that? Because I can imagine, community is so important, especially when you're going off and doing your own thing where it's like you're being vulnerable, you're putting yourself out there, you're trying to build your dream, and then to not have that support from someone who is part of your community. What's your advice for someone who might be experiencing something similar?
I've always leaned into the fact that every season of your life, there are going to be people that come with you, and there's going to be people that just serve that season. So, definitely in business building, I what was so beautiful was that the people that I never thought would support me and never thought would, just do anything to help me grow my brand were the ones showing up and showing up so well. I remember having, like, just my book signing in Toronto, last year, late last year, and I remember inviting kind of like my whole community in Toronto, and the people that showed up are the last people I thought would come. Like,
Wow.
I literally was like, I had no expectation that they'd come, and those were the people that were showing up, posting on social and buying books, not only for themselves, but for their community. I was blown away.
Amazing. Looking back on that girl who jumped in, that first day of class in, your master's program, and you're like, "No, this isn't for me." And to all these amazing things you've done, throughout your life, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of just being able to maintain my values and what's important to me, and just showing up well for others despite, where I've been. And treating people with kindness and love even when they didn't necessarily deserve it. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'm proud about, because it's not easy to do, and it takes everything in you to not turn up.
I think you've demonstrated that so well in those challenging moments where you still showed up with integrity and kindness. This is who you are, and I'm so glad you are bringing this into all the work that you're doing with these companies, clients, and I'm excited for all that you will continue to do in this world. And I'd love for people to hear more about your book. Congratulations! Can you give us a quick little, highlight about what this book is about and where folks can find it?
Yeah, so the book is called Thrive in Color: How to Master Self Advocacy and Command Your Career as an Underrepresented Professional. Even if you're not, you don't identify as underrepresented, the book is filled with basically tools and strategies that are going to help you understand your voice and take your power back in the workplace so you can continuously drive towards your goals and passions despite challenging environments. And so, I really wrote it with the heart for underrepresented professionals. I didn't think that there was anything in the market that gave them the how to, definitely the motivation, but what are the actual, strategies that one can apply today and really move the needle in their career? So, I work predominantly in the corporate space. I don't do too much public facing program, trainings and things like that yet. So the book was really a way to scale and share what I teach in corporate spaces, so everybody has access to the tools and strategies to own their careers and own their narratives. So it's available anywhere you buy books, but exclusively available on Audible for audio if you're interested in that.
Amazing. Davika, thank you so much for your time. I am just so inspired by your story, and I know so many individuals listening will relate and resonate with what you've shared and just be inspired by what you shared as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.